Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be back. It's been a while since I've done a chess instructional video. Now that we have the TaTa Steel tournament taking place, here is a game from round one that caught my eye between GM Anish Giri with the white pieces and GM Ian Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces. Game started out as a Pirc defense, a rare guest at the top level these days. A lot of transpositional possibilities uh, exist after the move d6. So Gary chooses the most principled response in d4. Knight f6 immediately attacking the e4 pawn. Knight c3, and now g6 here. Bishop e3, a6. Now, um, black is very aware of white's early attacking possibilities, especially when white delays the development of his knight on g1 to f3. Anytime white is taking his time and playing moves like bishop e3 or bishop e2, sometimes h3, without committing the knight on g1 to f3, usually is a sign that white tends to plans to play aggressively on the king side, leaving the f pawn unobstructed so that the move f4 can be played, or f3, in combination with moves like g4, h4, etc., with an aggressive attacking scheme on the queen side. This explains black's reply in a6. He understands that if white is going to initiate play on the wing early on the king side, that he also must make sure that he has some counterplay going on also on the opposite wing. This is accomplished by a6, usually followed by b5, and also the same can be done, and is done rather in a lot of games, with c6 followed by b5, a5, and same plans, um, attacking on the opposite wing. The assumption is with this scheme that since the bishop on the queen side is developed first, that usually white will follow up with the move like queen d2, often after protecting the e3 bishop from moves like knight g4, just swapping it off. But usually white's plan will be queen d2 and the rapid castling on the queen side. So black is basically anticipating this plan ahead of time. So a lot of water has um, has floated under the bridge since Pirc was first introduced into modern practice. And in the olden days, there were a lot of miniature games in the Pirc where white uh, would just use a primitive scheme to quickly overrun black's defenses. I'm gonna just give you a quick example. We're not gonna go off into a large, theoretical discussion here, but I just want to give you an example of the systems, of one of the systems that black would definitely have trouble with when the Pirc was first becoming, of age on the scene. So here is our game in position. So again, you have Gary playing the move queen d2 here, b5 again, anticipating this and getting in the counterplay immediately. Notice how the bishop here is delayed, right? The development of the bishop is delayed, and also black does not commit early to the king side. And at this point, this is where I want to show you this game right here. So let's go a little further, and we see the move f3. Again, f3 is just simply there to prevent this move knight g4, swapping off this bishop, and also helps white with the king side assault by supporting the pawn, advance to g4 and h4, h5, etc., cracking open the king side. So let's go back from there, and we're gonna just briefly look at the game from the Russian Championship in 1974 between Grandmaster Alexander Belyavsky and Gennady Kuzmin with the black pieces. So that game went e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, bishop e3, c6 again with the same idea as a6 with this expansion on the queen side, queen d2, b5, now f3, bishop d3 is also possible. Queen c7. Again, notice how black is not committing to the king side. Castle. Now knight bd7. d5. a6, supporting the b5 pawn. And d takes. White does the right thing, being ahead in development. King still in the middle of the board. Rapidly opens up the position. Queen takes c6. Knight ge2. Bishop b7. Knight d4 hitting the queen. Queen drops back. g4. Rook c8. And now the position has a feel of almost Sicilian dragon, whereby black is a little bit further behind in development than he normally would be, especially on the king side rather, since he has utilized that time to develop his queen side initiative. His king is a little bit drafty in the center. g5, b4. Black decides to fight for the initiative. Knight cb5. A takes b5. G takes f6. Knight takes f6. And only if black had a few more tempi, he could play bishop g7 and castle, and then perhaps enjoy these two open files on the king. But bishop takes b5 check. Knight is practically forced back. d7. And then after e5, black simply resigned. Black really can't take here because of the battery of the queen and rook on the d file, and also he can't afford to just bypass the pawn on e5 either with d5 because of the simple move e6, again exploiting the pin here. And there's just too many threats. Even at the capture, the knight comes rushing into the position. And so this shows you what can go wrong. So we see here that although black did not commit to early castling on the queen side, he got caught in the middle, which is worse too, to get your king caught in the middle of the board. So you're definitely playing a game of tightrope there in certain variations, and you have to be very careful. Usually, or back in the olden days, also black used to castle prematurely and also get overrun on the king side in a similar, in a similar fashion. So black try to delay castling, and sometimes black would get caught in the middle of the board. This variation also, or a similar variation such as f3, this move also can be played here and is often played at this point. So you might say, what's the difference? Well, notice that white hasn't committed his knight to c3 here. So for instance, if black plays g6 right away, well, you can transpose to a king's Indian by just playing c4, and you're out of the king's pawn game altogether. So these are little subtleties that you have to look for. Also, f3, there's a great stem game, of course, to look at, and that's the game Kasparov Topalov from 1999, which is probably widely recognized as Kasparov's immortal game. Anyway, let's get back into this. Just wanted to give you some basic ideas um, behind White's um, early f3 and the reason why Black is playing a6. So what we have is White is revealing his intentions early with f3, and Black is trying to counter attack utilizing that information to spring his attack on the queen side, hopefully to discourage Black from doing so. But if, excuse me, discourage White from castling queen side. But if he does, he has his counterplay ready to go. Meanwhile, he has not given White a clear target on the king side yet, as his king has not committed to either side of the board. Knight bd7 is played by Nepomniachtchi, and Giri castles anyway. And knight b6 again. Notice in the modern play, Black has to be very careful here as his king is in the middle of the board, because as we saw in the Belyavsky game, his king in the middle of the board is not necessarily safe either, and it's possible for White just to sometimes just to be able to open up the position, and the king gets caught out there in the middle. G4, same idea. Bishop b7, knight h3. Now the other knight goes to d7. And this is very important for Black, because getting, keeping the position closed for Black is critical at this point, because he's behind in development. So therefore, he can't afford to have the position open. So for instance, moves like e5, a move like e5 can be met by d5, for example, keeping the position closed. Maybe Black will be faced with a sacrifice like that, which you always got to be careful of. But the idea for Black in general, again, of course, this is a bad example because there's tactics here, but just in general, Black wants to keep the position closed at this moment as much as possible. He's not ready to start a fight with the white pieces at this moment. Not in the middle of the board. So he's trying to set up his counterplay, but at the same time keep the position closed on the center and the king side. Bishop e2, e6, again playing this crouching tiger, hidden dragon type game whereby e5 comes, then d5, keeping the position closed as long as possible till he can conceivably catch up in development. Bishop g5, bishop e7, queen e3. Bishops are traded off. Again, notice, if a move like g5 were to occur, Black will simply pass. Queen h4. Knight f2. This leads us to another principle that's good for all beginners to know, that again, development is very important, right? You always hear develop your pieces, develop your pieces. However, if the position is closed, or your opponent cannot open up the position, his development is not as important. Leading development is a factor based on the amount of time that you have in the position. Usually, when you have a lead in development, you're on a shot clock, so to speak. If you can't utilize the lead in development right in a certain period of time, your opponent will eventually catch up, and that lead in development will dissipate. So the normal idea when you have a lead in development is try to open up the position to exploit that lead in development. I call it starting a fight, right? That's like if you have 5 of your friends and you roll up on 2 rivals, right? You want to start the fight right then and there on the spot, while you outnumber your opponent 5-2. If you allow them to run away and go get 3 of their buddies, then it's 5-5, and then the fight is now even. Or even yet, if you waste more time, they might get more buddies than you have, and now it's 6-5. So time is very important when you have such dynamic advantages such as a lead in development. And right here, Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces has done a great job in keeping the position closed. Look at the pawn structure, right? And you see he's traded off dark square bishops, and he has his queen on h4, which is very annoying, right? There will be no h4 played by white anytime soon. He's using his queen, right, to basically take the place of the dark squared bishop, right? Because getting rid of the dark squared bishop does leave some weaknesses on the dark square, but he has that covered because he's using his queen in place, right, of that, and using the queen to patrol the dark squares. But most importantly, he's kept the position closed while he has organized his pieces comfortably, and now he can castle queenside as he does. And this is kind of the modern approach to playing against these systems like f3. You can still castle on the opposite wings, but it's usually right up white's alley. This what white wants you to do is castle kingside, where he has the early, um, dibs basically on the king side attack with g4, h4, and all of that stuff like that. Nowadays, you'll see many games go just like this in this line. Even a Topalov Kasparov game, um, Topalov wound up castling on the queen side, even though he lost in a brilliancy. So f4. And of course, now white is going to be able to open the position, but it's not going to be as dramatic. As you can see, black is caught up in development here. Now white's advantage is his space here. He has space, and he has a slightly better pawn structure than black does, right? Because after all, these advances, when not being used in attack, can constitute a weakness here. f5, and now bishop f3, b4, and now Giri plays in a risky manner. I think this is probably a blunder, and I think Giri was not prepared for the Pirc at all, as he consumed a lot of time at this point. Nepomniachtchi had about an hour and 10 minutes on the clock. Giri had about 25 minutes, all at move 17. And here, after b4, right, the knight is struck, and Giri decides to sacrifice a piece here, right? And hopefully he can have some kind of pawn avalanche in the middle of the board and possibly promote a pass pawn, but it's just not tactically sound. He takes f5, Nepomniachtchi snatches the piece. B takes c3, c takes b2 check, king over, knight f6, and perhaps again Giri was hoping to have some type of connection here with these pawns and dominate the center, and one of these pawns get pushed through, or at least cost black a piece here. Bishop takes b7, king takes b7. Deft move by Nepomniachtchi, just shutting down the center. So now there's no way that this pawn is going to connect to help the advance. Knight d3, knight e4, knight e7. Again, just not enough firepower for Giri. Again, this is his hope right here to somehow be able to push these pawns. And after that, Giri just resigned. There's really, it's not a realistic expectation. He realized that his sacrificial theme had failed, and he gave it up with 15 minutes left on the clock. So good game by Nepomniachtchi. It seemed like he surprised his opponent, playing at I don't want to call it an offbeat defense, but again, you don't see it that often. And I hope you learned some of the basic, ideas in this particular line with F3. Of course, there's all types of variations here. Like I said, C6 could have been played in place of A6, but the theme is basically the same. F3 is basically like a primitive approach to and when I say primitive, I don't mean that it's not good. It's just an obvious attacking scheme nowadays. F3, you're gonna play G4 and H4, H5, etc. And if Black wants to make the game really fun and exciting, yeah, he can play Bishop G7, castle kingside, and just go right into it, and then just go to war with white. But practice has shown early on in the development of this variation that white usually gets his attack in first when black doesn't take time to get his queen side counterplay going. And this is why various methods had been tried. First, it was you know to castle on the king side, and after black was blown out of the water several times, and black started not castling early and started playing moves like a6, c6, keeping the king in the middle a little bit longer, and then eventually castling on the queen side. So that's the story of this game. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. Check the links down below for DVDs on DVDs and books on this particular opening, and I'll see you guys on the next video.